and I just realized my mic was muted. So I hope you guys heard what I said, but I wanted to just say welcome back. Welcome back to the Virginia Democratic Small Business Caucus Show. And hopefully you were hearing our intro, or you saw our intro. And I guess I'm a little rusty from being gone for a couple of weeks. Had a little bit of some personal things I need to take care of. And we also showed a couple of rebroadcasts. But once again, as you saw at the beginning of the show, hopefully you heard too, as we began the show again at the beginning, that you heard our intro. We always like to sort of start out with Bob again. So I'm going to back it up and go again. Here we go, folks. Okay, there you go. Welcome back to the Virginia Democratic Small Business Caucus Show, live. And we're happy to have you back here on March 16th, 2022. Stay woke on Woke Wednesday. We welcome you back here at the Small Business Caucus Show. And we've got a great guest this evening with Lauren Burke. She's a fantastic journalist and a fantastic small business owner. So we're looking forward to a discussion with her later on. And once again, this is this show is informal, it's informative, and it's engaging. And mostly you might get a little bit of anything because, you know, we're broadcasting live and we don't have a whole lot of support. So we just kind of get things going the way we need them to go and make sure we're getting information out to you. But the most important thing is that you're here. And when you get a chance to log into the broadcast, we're looking forward to having you. Yeah, so welcome back. It's Woke Wednesday on the VADSBC show, live. And folks, we're going to just have myself because my co-host, who is the interim chair for the Louisiana Democratic Small Business Caucus, she's not going to be on today. She's actually out with some personal issues, but she'll be back. And we're just welcoming you back and welcoming myself back because I've been gone for a while. But hanging in there. And listen, folks, if you're looking to support small business in Virginia, if you're looking to become a small business person, if you're looking just to stay engaged in what's happening in Virginia and around the country, we're glad that you're taking the time really to come into our podcast and just sort of hear some informal and some informative and some engaging talk on two main things we like to talk about. One is voting rights, and I'll get into that a little bit later, and talking a little bit about, you know, this pandemic that we're currently going through. And I'll just start off there. Listen, folks, things are loosening up a little bit, as you well know. The pandemic is not as bad as it was at once. We kind of made it through another little hump, but hey, as we can see, the government's loosening up a little bit. But people are still out there wearing their masks. They're still social distancing, and state and federal governments are loosening up. That's all a good thing, I guess, for small business and for people's communities. But then again, continue to take care of yourself. And if you haven't gotten your vaccination, folks, do your due diligence, get your vaccinations for yourself and for your loved ones, and just continue to move ahead because we're going to beat this thing in the end. So that's all I got to say on that. So just do what you need to do and, you know, keep yourself healthy. Other than that, I just want to ask you one question. What have you been doing in the last couple of weeks while we haven't been here besides watching our reruns and our rebroadcasts? Hopefully you've been thinking about some of the issues that we've been confronted here, because a whole lot of things have happened. We're continuing to see legislation here in Virginia and things changing that we're not really comfortable with here as Democrats. But based on the last election, we lost all three of our statewide offices, with the with the Attorney General, with the Lieutenant Governor, and the governorship. But however, we also lost control of the House of Delegates, and we really only are holding the line at the state Senate in Virginia. So, you know, we've got some sort of things to battle with here, and we're doing what we need to do to sort of keep things happening here in Virginia that are making things good for Virginia small business and making things good for a lot of the ideals and the beliefs and some of the progressive things that Virginians have been fighting for a long time. So a lot of that stuff is still in place, and we still have the Senate out there protecting those things for us. So stay with it, folks. Don't be discouraged. Be encouraged. Still, from a small business perspective in Virginia, there's a lot of good and interesting things happening, and I want to talk a little bit about that. Because small business still is on a growth rate in Virginia. And we're trying to continue to make sure not just small business in Virginia, but small business around the country and the various different constituencies in small business are actually having an opportunity to continue to grow and get opportunities in the federal sector, in the state government sector, and also in the private sector. And that's one of the reasons why we're out here, because we like to kind of tell that story a little bit about how the different small businesses are doing and some of the things that are challenges to them out there, and how we can help and how we can advocate as a Virginia Democratic Small Business Caucus on those concerns. Right now, there's still the Build Back Better plan out there. You guys know that the infrastructure bill was passed, and we didn't get everything that we wanted with the human infrastructure bill, but the physical infrastructure bill was passed out there, and the American Rescue Plan was passed out there. But no matter what's going on, I think what a lot of small business people have come to realize over these last couple of years of COVID is that, and I guess people who also are what you would call W-2 employees, that you really are going to have to depend on yourselves to make sure that you are doing what you need to do to make sure that you can take care of yourself and your families. And that goes from a healthcare standpoint, that goes from an income standpoint, that goes for how you engage civically with your local, state, and federal government representatives, and in addition, how you actually deal with the economy, because people are finding out that maybe it makes a whole lot more sense for me to get things done as a small business person than me to go back into some areas where we're not really getting the things that we may need and do need as working as a W-2 employee. And I think that's what a lot of the large businesses and small businesses alike are finding out there, is that they've kind of switched things around out there. Employees are finding out, and people who are entrepreneurial minded are finding out they can get things done on their own, and that they're out there working to make sure that they're getting a good quality of life and a quality as far as what they're looking for when they're working for someone or working for themselves, and they're finding out that they can actually deliver on those things for themselves. So there's both good and bad that has come from this past 2 years of COVID and the different changes and things that have happened with the government and also with the private sector. And I would probably lean on saying, as far as the small business person is concerned, probably for the better, and the better for people who are actually out there trying to start their small businesses or trying to do some things other than work for large companies or other employers. They're finding out that they have a lot of agency, they have a lot of creative capability, and they're putting that talent to work for themselves, their families, and their community. And I say, for one, fantastic. Let's see more of it, and let's see how we can make sure that the government is helpful, not just to the large organizations that are out there, for the small businesses that are out there, and all those constituencies of small businesses that are out there, whether or not you're African-American owned business or woman owned business, Latino owned, Asian owned, veteran owned business, LGBTQ owned business. There's just so many different constituencies within the small business community, and so much that's happening out there, the great economy like we have here in the United States, that people are finding out with their agency and with a little ingenuity that they can get things done on their own. So keep on doing it. Keep on doing it. And I'll get off my soapbox on that, and I'll turn around and talk about my favorite subject. But before I talk about that favorite subject, since I've been gone for a couple of weeks, there's a whole lot that's been going on. And one of the things that's been going on is that there's a new Supreme Court justice that's out there that I believe today was the starting of the first time for the new Ketanji Jackson, I believe. Let me put her picture up here real quick. And let me get my picture out straight. Now, let me see what I got this looking. Man, I tell you, I'll get this technology straight in a minute, folks. But what I'm trying to show you is that is the new Supreme Court nominee, Ketanji Jackson, and she is amazing. And I believe she's first starting formally this week to really go around and talk to the various different senators and starting to really sort of doing what she needs to do to become the next Supreme Court justice that will get the votes that she needs from the United States Senate, as the President Biden has put her forward as the next choice. And it really is a historic choice with this particular soon-to-be jurist. Because she's got a fantastic background, and we certainly are looking to have the first African-American woman, the first person who's actually been not a prosecutor, but a defending attorney, and as well as being a federal judge. She's kind of taken all different angles of what's been going on in the legal world, so that she's so well-rounded and comes from a background that most of the justices, we haven't seen that since Thurgood Marshall. So we really are looking forward to really having Ketanji Jackson make it onto the bench. And I certainly hope I'm not screwing up her name. But we look forward to having her there. So let's talk a little bit about my favorite subject right now, a little bit. Let's go to it, because what we want to talk about now, folks, is what's really important, things that kind of makes it foundational to democratic, to any democracy. And folks, there it is. It's voting rights. Voting rights, voting rights, voting rights. Voting rights are foundational to any democracy. If you don't have unfettered access to the polls, then your ability to participate as a citizen in the United States or any democracy is severely curtailed. You must have access to to the voting polls, unfettered access to the voting polls, or you don't have any way that you can participate in the democracy and get your voice heard in a way that means anything. Because in the end, your vote for the particular person who's running for office and who becomes your local, your state, or your federal representative is all based upon voting rights. And so let's talk a little bit first about my favorite subject with voting rights is let's talk about the John Lewis H.R. 4 Voting Rights Act, which was passed out of the United States Congress. And again, I'll take a little time to talk about that because I think it's important that we understand what that what HR 4 was all about. Let me see if I can get my technology going right here today. Okay, so again, the Voting Rights Act is the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act. Basically deals with the preclearance issue. The preclearance issue, it puts preclearance back into into the Civil Rights Voting Rights Act that was established in 1965. And what that means in short is the preclearance piece basically says before any changes happen to any voting laws in any states, there must be it must happen at least 180 days prior to any election, and it's also has to be pre-cleared by the Department of Justice. Why is this important? The pre-clearance piece is important by the Department of Justice at least 180 days before any election, because that prevents all of the things that have been going on now and have been going on in the past in the former Jim Crow era, where people were being denied their rights to votes by having to, guess the amount of jelly beans in a jar, or be able to recite the Constitution, or any other crazy thing that any state could come up with in order to say, like a poll tax or something, in order to allow someone to vote. H.R. 4, or the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, basically says, folks, let's put the preclearance back into place. Let's make sure that any laws that need to be changed happen at least 180 days before any election, and make sure that the Department of Justice can make sure that anything that's being proposed by any of the states has to get cleared through the Department of Justice. That's why the Voting Rights Act was so important, because it is the thing that was fought for so hard throughout and prior to the Civil Rights Movement and up till 1965, till finally it was signed into law by President Johnson in 1965. And then in 2013, when the opponents of the Voting Rights Act on the Supreme Court decided that it was no longer important or no longer needed, and if the House of Representatives or the legislating body in the U.S. federal government wanted to put it back in, then they could just simply pass another law and put the Voting Rights Act preclearance piece back into place. So basically, they took, which was the cornerstone of the Voting Rights Act, the enforcement piece, and just got rid of it. And as soon as that happened, the following week, states who had been bad actors in the past, and not just the states that are in the Old South, but also there were bad actors in the North as well, went right back to doing what they were doing before in 1965. And now, since then, there's been more than 400 and some odd laws to suppress the vote in a minimum of at least 43 of the 50 states. As soon as they had the opportunity to make sure that they could deny Americans their right to vote, and I'm not just talking African Americans, because these voter suppression laws that have been coming out of these state houses not only stop African Americans from voting, but they also stop all Americans from free and unfettered access. And you're probably saying to yourself, well, geez, how are they doing that? Well, let me give you an example of one of the laws that was out there that they've recently passed. They call it Jim Crow 2.0. So if you live in an area where there should be more than one voting poll because of the density of the population, they reduce that area to a single voting poll, and then people are waiting in line for literally hours just to vote. Or mail-in votes or absentee ballots. They've made it very cumbersome for people to be able to simply execute an absentee ballot or mail-in ballot, which we've been doing, or Americans have been doing, for literally decades around the country. But they've made that process even shorter, the window shorter for you to actually do it. And then the rules for actually having to do it have become even more so difficult for people in order to do it. Like, oh, you now need to get this, what do you call it? I'm sorry, it's escaping me, the term. You're going to need to, when you go to the bank and you have to get something notarized. I'm sorry, folks. In some cases, you have to get it notarized, and you have to have it two certain forms of ID, just making the process much more difficult. So people just can't do it. And even once they get through all of that, then the actual drop-off boxes for you to return the ballot has been reduced. All kinds of things. All these things together make it more difficult for people to vote, because if you shorten the window of the time for people to vote, if you change the processes for people to vote, or another thing that they're doing is they're purging voter polls. For example, let's say you voted in the last presidential election, but the election coming up is your local or state election. Some places are purging the voting rolls and saying, well, if you don't vote in every election, you got to re-register every time. It's just all kind of anything they can do to basically throw a wrench into in the process of making it easy for people to vote for their representatives, they're doing. And the only thing that clears all of that out is the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. So there's one set of rules for all 50 states and territories, and each state just can't come up with any sort of creative idea to somehow block the ability for an American citizen to vote for their local, state, and federal representatives without jumping through all these various different hoops. So there you go. That's what HR 4 does with that. But then you also have HR 1, which also was passed. That's HR 4. HR 1, which is the For the People Act. And the For the People Act goes even further. This is a bill that was passed out of the House of Representatives that basically expands access to voting by having automatic and same-day voter registration nationwide, 2 weeks of early voting for all voters, a ban on purging the voting polls, as I mentioned earlier, also making sure that the full protections of the Voting Rights Act of 1965 for pre-clearance are put back into place, which we just talked about earlier. And also it includes more finance reforms, banning foreign money, money for election security, and independent commissions to prevent gerrymandering. Basically, gerrymandering is where the politicians pick their voters as opposed to the voters picking the politicians, and or doing things like what they call racking and stacking districts, where at the state level, give an example what gerrymandering does and why it's such a bad practice. Every 10 years, we have a census per the Constitution that they have to count everybody in the country. And based on those numbers, congressional districts for voting purposes, and because it's basically looking at where people are living, how many people are living, if there's certain things that have changed. Let's say, for example, if more people, for example, moved into Virginia, and Virginia has like maybe 11 congressional districts, and they're saying, wow, Virginia really has grown. A lot of people the last 10 years have moved here. This is just a for instance. We're going to have to add an additional congressional district because there are just so many more people. So maybe there's 12. But what gerrymandering actually happens is that they'll just say, well, there's been a whole bunch of people who've come into the country of or growth in the population in the country, I should rather say, where rather than people having a congressional representative to represent them because of the growth of the population in that particular part of Virginia, what they'll do is say, we won't add an additional congressional district or seat and make it an additional congressperson. We'll just take all these new people and we'll rack and stack and pack them into this other district. So let's just say if there were growth of more African Americans or more Latinos or more young people or more whatever it is that was counted in the census, they'll just take, rather than having someone to represent this new group, which would give them a new congressperson with a new congressional district, they'll take those people and they'll stick them all into the existing districts. So therefore, when they send the folks to the Washington D.C. to be represented, guess what? There should be 12, but now there's not 12. There's only 11 because they've chosen, for example, to just stuff them in certain districts. So this whole thing about gerrymandering is not a good thing. And that's the reason why you need to make sure that voters are picking the politicians, and politicians are not picking the voters that you do through gerrymandering. And that goes on, unfortunately, on both sides. I don't think Democrats are completely not guilty of doing a little gerrymandering themselves, and Republicans. But either way, it amounts to voter suppression in that sense of the word. So you really don't want to see it. And the other thing that happens that's in the For the People's Act that got passed through to the Senate, just to talk about it, is election security. I talked about that. Grants to states to replace or add voting machines, processes for making sure that you're auditing and securing voting results. And you're probably saying, well, what's that all about? Well, what's going on now, where you had independent, nonpartisan people who were actually running elections and counting the votes, what they're doing now is they're having a lot of partisan laws that are being passed regarding the counting of the votes and the results of the voting. So, for example, what they're doing is saying, okay, we'll put in, if the other side has the majority in the state house, what they'll do is say, well, we're not going to leave it to this separate county to count and do their own impartial, independent counting and the running of the elections. We're going to make sure that the last word ends with the House of Delegates, or either the Senate, or whichever group. But that's a political outcome to elections, as opposed to having people who are independent and not political that run the elections, that count the votes, and that report them. What they're trying to do now is saying, well, if we don't like the outcome of who voted, then since we're counting them and we don't like it, we can mess with that outcome. That's what kind of happened in 2020. They tried to change the outcome of what happened after the election. And that's crazy, right? So we've been doing this for over 200 years, and we haven't done it flawlessly every time, but it is, for the most part, been an independent thing that each particular governing body within each state that has their own laws for how they conduct elections. In most cases, they've always been independent and not political in any way or partisan in any way. That everyone who's actually conducting the elections, running the polls, counting the votes, and then turning them over to the process has always been something that's been an independent process and an impartial process. But those are the sort of laws that have been passed in 43 states, more than 400 and some odd laws that are trying to change and impact how we vote in this country, and all that falls underneath the term of voting rights. So it can get to be really kind of difficult for people to understand how this works, right? If they don't have complete and unfettered access to their ability to vote. And we don't want to go back to what we had in the pre-1965 Jim Crow era and have a new era of Jim Crow 2.0, where all of these sort of shenanigans are being introduced that are messing with people's right to simply have free and unfettered access to vote. Enough time to vote, no one messing with the vote once the vote has been cast, the ability to, not have to wait hours and hours on end in order to vote, because people have to, go to work. Not everybody has the luxury of not having to work. So people need to go in, cast your vote, make sure your vote gets counted, and may the best person win. That's really how it goes. It's as simple as that. Now, what can you do, right? What can you do if you want to help out with this? Well, one of the things that you can do as an American citizen is simply contact your congressperson. This is your call to action. When I say, what can you do? What can you do means is the call to action. The call to action is call your congressperson and tell them that you're aware that there's HR 1, which is the the For the People Act of 2021, and there's also HR 4, the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, and that you are aware that both of these acts have passed the House of Representatives and have gone to the Senate. And there's even a bill that's being worked on in the Senate that was brought up for a vote. And of course, we all know what happened. We did not get the support of 2 Democratic senators, Joe Manchin from West Virginia and Christian Sinema from Arizona. And the Voting Rights Act was not passed. So in order for that Voting Rights Act to pass, you needed to get at least a simple majority, and that simple majority, once it was had on in the Senate, then it goes to the president's desk for signature to be a law. That never happened. That doesn't mean that it won't happen. What it means is that you have to continue to fight. And it means that you have to continue to step out there and do what you need to do in order to make sure that you're going to be able to have the voting rights that you want, and that we've always had in this country, particularly since they were hard fought for in 1965. And every year passed and renewed on a regular basis to make sure all Americans have free and unfettered access to the polls. So right now is usually about the time where I would start to do a little bit of a introduction of our guests, and our guest really gets introduced around about this time. But I can talk a little bit more about voting rights as we wait on our guest to get here. Now, when she does, I'll give her a fantastic introduction. But listen, folks, don't be discouraged, and also, don't get comfortable, because you might say, hey, listen, I'm not having any trouble voting. So you may think to yourself, well, there's no trouble where I vote at. What's the big deal? What's going on with these 443 voter suppression laws that are happening in more than 40 states around the country? And you say to yourself, what's the big deal? I can vote. Everybody who I know can vote. Well, the point is there's 49 other states and additional territories like the Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico and, I don't know, Guam. Did I name all the other places that aren't states that actually vote in presidential elections or have representatives in the House of Representatives? Like Washington, D.C., it doesn't have a senator, but it has a representative in the House. And the point is that where there's change going on around the country, where the numbers are changing and the demographics are changing, people are trying to prevent, or I would say the enemies of democracy in this country are trying to prevent people who have the right to vote as American citizens from actually having the ability to exercise their vote by passing all these incredible maze and of additional laws and rules, figuring they'll just they'll create so much voter fatigue and making it so difficult for you simply to just cast a vote that the people won't come out and vote. And even though there's changes in populations, changes in demographics, people moving, populations going up in some states, going down in other states, or the mixture of, America is a very mobile country and people tend to move around a lot. And as they do move around, as I said, in every census, those numbers of people get counted. And as those numbers of people get counted, then they have to adjust on how they actually do what they do as far as voting districts are concerned and everything else. So that's when you get into that whole discussion about redistricting and other things of that nature. But one of the ways that they know the easiest way to sort of keep status quo and to try to keep your finger in the dike, in the dike of change, is just don't allow people the ability to vote. Make it very hard for them to vote, so things will stay. So they think things will stay the same if they can get people not to vote. But the point of the matter is, most people are very determined. They're going to vote. They're going to deal with whatever obstacles they have to deal with. They're going to do whatever it is that they need to do in order to cast their ballot as Americans, because a lot of people fought and died for that here in this country and abroad, for the right to vote and for free democracy in this country. My family, I'm sure your family, in the various different wars we've had since the inception of this country, starting with the American Revolution, right through to the Civil War, right through to all the other conflicts that have happened since then, from World War I to World War II, to the Vietnam War, to the different conflicts that have happened in the Middle East, from issues of 9/11 and so forth. There's been a number of different things, and I'm only talking about some of the major conflicts where Americans have put the greatest measure that they can give is to give their lives in protection of this country and the democracy that we have. And that's something that you shouldn't take lightly. When people have given their greatest measure, sons and daughters, for the protection of our democracy, and then you have somebody from within or from without that are trying to stop this democracy from being what it's meant to be. It doesn't matter what race you are. It doesn't matter what gender you are. It doesn't matter from what part of the country that you live, or how you speak at home, or whom you love. What makes you an American is your belief in the Constitution of the United States and your willingness to protect the rights of all Americans for that's in the Constitution of the United States. So a lot of people have given their full measure, and a lot of people have, come back from wherever they've had to come back with as veterans and other people, people of my family and my father and others, in protecting this Constitution and what we believe here in the United States that makes us all Americans. And again, nothing to do with race, nothing to do with gender, nothing to do with where you live or how you speak. It all has to do with your belief and support of the Constitution of the United States and the rights that you have therein as an American citizen. So that's what we're fighting for here. We're making sure that people will have the ability to continue to have that right here in this country and to protect it. And it takes vigilance in order to do that. It takes a lot of vigilance. It's not like people who are trying to subvert the freedoms that we have in this country are going to quit. They're not going to quit. They're going to continue to do what they've always done, because that's just the nature of folks. You're going to have folks who don't believe people should have freedom in order to have the rights that we have in the Constitution here in the United States. And they're going to think, well, everybody doesn't deserve freedom. Only I deserve this freedom, or only this particular group deserves this freedom. But these freedoms are guaranteed to all Americans. And if you want to keep those freedoms, and you're going to have to fight for them, you're going to have to make sure you're doing whatever you can do. If it's just calling your congressperson, if it's getting out there and protesting, if it's just being vigilant and staying on something until it gets done, then you have to stick with it until it gets done. You just can't stop doing what you need to do just because the road is getting kind of tough. Well, when the road gets tough, the tough gets going, and the call to action is for you to continue to do what you need to do to support this country and our rights to having the ability to vote and have unfettered access to those polls, so that we can get people in local government, state government, and federal government to get the representation that we want. And it all starts with voting. It all starts with voting. I don't care what your issue is. And I'm not saying one issue is better than another issue. But what I am saying to you is, in order to get a law passed in this country, local, state, or federal laws, you have to get people elected who believe in that, and then they have to go to their local, state, or federal legislator, and they have to advocate and create laws that have the policies in them that you believe in. Those same sort of laws that got passed with the Voting Rights Act of 1965. Same process had to happen because, well, if people don't want to obey the law or obey what the Constitution has in it, then they're like, okay, let's pass a law for that. Let's pass a law that basically says all Americans have the right to vote in this country. And if someone wants to change any of the laws, then they're going to have to go through the Department of Justice at least 180 days before any election for pre-clearance before any of these changes to any voting laws happen in any of these states. Why do we have to do that? Because we have bad actors. Why do we have laws? Because if everybody sort of followed and did the right thing and treated people fairly the way they wanted to be treated, then you probably wouldn't need additional laws on top of the fact that we have a Constitution that already clearly says this. But now you have people who want to mess with the wording of those constitutions at a state level that make it difficult for people to vote. And what we're trying to simply do here is just make sure that that does not continue to happen, because we've already been there. We've already fought that battle. But when you're being vigilant about something, if you have to continue to fight that battle, then you just simply fight that battle again. You get the voting rights laws passed again. So, and continue to protect them by making sure that you do what you need to do by being a good citizen and participating in civil discourse and voting on a local, state, and federal level. So that's what we're trying to do now. And it can be a little difficult, but I'm not tired. Well, I'm not tired of, I'm not tired to the point that I'm willing to give up, because too much is on the line. Too much is on the line. If you decide that you're too tired and you don't want to defend your right to vote, then you're simply saying that you're going to let others determine what's best for you and your family and your business, and for the things that you need to do in order to live a quality life here in this country or in any democracy. And the thing that allows you to lead a quality life in a democracy is your voice and your right to vote. So if there's certain things that are happening that you want to support or you don't want to support, your ability to have a voice to do that is with your vote. Other than that, you simply don't have a say. You have to put up with whatever anyone else decides. And that's not a democracy. That is a dictatorship. That is an autocracy. That is a monarchy. Okay. So these are the sort of things that you have to do. Wait a minute. So these are the things that you need to be able to do. I mean, we're having a live thing here, folks. I think we're having trouble getting our guest here. Okay, I need to take care of this right now. So stand by as we take care of these things. I've got someone online here, so here we go here. Let me see. 7 p.m. I'm trying to see if I can help our guest get in. I'm going to click the link. Let's see here. I don't know what's going on here. I hope this helps our guests be able to get in. I don't understand what the problem. Okay, so what we can do is let's see if we get our guest in on it. And folks, I tell you all the time, this is live broadcasting here. So if you've ever been to a live concert, there's lots of stuff that you'll see that you'll only see at a live concert. You'll never see it on a video or anything that's pre-recorded, because the beautiful thing about a live event is life happens. And people have to adjust to whatever goes on at that time because it's live. And hopefully we'll get our person online. I think we might have her online, and we can talk for at least the next 10 minutes. And if we're going to run out of time, we won't have the full amount of time, but we'll add her. We'll have her back. So as I continue to fill these airwaves, these live airwaves from the Virginia Democratic Small Business Caucus, listen, folks, I'm just talking to you and telling you this is worth your time. This is worth your effort. You can't be tired of fighting for voting rights. You really can't. Because what you're simply saying is, hey, I'd rather have a dictatorship. I'd rather have an autocracy or a monarchy. My voice doesn't matter. The voice that I have for my family, to talk about the things that I need to talk about in order to make sure that my children and my grandchildren and myself can lead a quality life, and my community can lead a quality life, because we have a say so. We have some agency in the things that we believe in, and we have an ability to make sure the resources that we provide to our government is spent in a way that we believe is best for our communities. Maybe we won't get everything that we want, but what we can do is make sure that some compromise can get us to something where we all can live with it. Or maybe we don't get it all at once. Maybe it happens over time, or sometimes, in the rare occasion, everybody agrees and it all happens at once. But I know one thing: if you don't have a vote, if you don't have a say, you won't get any of that. You just have to live with what other people tell you to do. And that's not American. That's not democracy. People have a right to voice their opinion. You may not necessarily agree with them, but you don't have a right to stop them from voting and voicing their opinion. That's a formula for a lot of not good things to happen. And we're going to bring on our guest. I'm going to talk a little bit about our guest. I'm going to introduce her. We don't have enough time to cover everything, but you know what? We got enough time to talk a little bit about this person, and she's a fantastic person. Let me tell you a little bit about her. Our special guest today is Lauren Victoria Burke. She's an independent journalist, a fantastic journalist, and she's also a communications consultant. And also, she's the host of her own podcast. It's called The Burke File. And she is also a political analyst who appears weekly on the Roland Martin Unfiltered show, which is on the Black Star Network. And Lauren has worked in politics on a federal level, on a state level. She's worked in New York. She's worked in Virginia. You can contact her at that information that's right there, lburke007@gmail.com. I just realized that's 007. I kind of like that. But Lauren is fantastic. I've listened to some of her podcasts on the Burke File. I find them very interesting. And she's had some great guests on there. And also, she can be reached on Twitter at LV Burke. So without further ado, folks, we're going to go ahead and bring into our podcast Lauren Burke. Hey, Lauren, how are you?
How are you? How are you, Mark? How's it going? It's been quite a day, Mark. It's been quite a day. We're getting more forgetful as the day goes on and as the years go by. So, my bad. I should have been here 40 minutes ago. I'm sorry about that.
Oh, listen, Lauren, the fact that you're here and that you're able to make it here, this gave me more time for me to just sort of talk more about my favorite subject, which is voting rights.
Oh, that's a good thing. Yeah,
I'm going to talk about and tell people, they need to get out there and fight for this, because this is where it really all starts in a democracy. You got to have those voting rights. But Lauren,
I hear you.
But listen, we can, we're running out of time, but it doesn't mean we can't have you on again. I just want people to see who you are. I mean, this is who Lauren is, and she's a fantastic person. She's got a fantastic podcast. It's called The Burke File. That is a fantastic picture too. I don't know who did that artwork for you, but it looks good.
I got to give credit to the makeup artist at CNN, because they made that magic happen in that photo. It definitely made that magic happen, because I'm not good at makeup, so that was somebody else's artistry.
Well, it's good. It's great. So Lauren, I got you on. Tell us a little bit about what you do, whatever you like to talk about. And guess what? Don't sweat it. We can have you back again, and we will.
Oh, I should sweat it because I've been sitting around here thinking, you're the fourth interview of the day. For some reason, all the interviews for me this week happened on one day, and today was the day. So I messed up on the time. That's totally my fault. Completely my fault. And you told me 7 o'clock 3 weeks ago. Henrietta, I'm not sure why I couldn't figure that out because you were the first one booked. So anyway, I spent today at the White House. I was at an event Kamala Harris did. You're probably aware that a bunch of HBCUs received bomb threats. And so Merrick Garland and the Secretary of Education, Secretary Cardona, and Kamala Harris made an announcement about some money that's actually allotted for school shootings. And but anyway, that money allotted for school shootings is really about trauma that may happen in an education institution. So they took that money. They're going to help HBCUs deal with what they had to deal with regard to bomb threats. So I actually had gone to the White House today just thinking I was going to go to the briefing and maybe ask a few questions of Jen Psaki, but not that she would particularly call on me, but you never know what can happen, right? And so I end up in this HBCU thing. So it took my attention away. Then we just had some excitement with Jussie Smollett being let out. So all my friends are excited about that. But let's keep it Virginia. Paul Goldman, who I've been interviewing for the podcast, Paul Goldman is really actually incredible. He actually should be the state NAACP, the Virginia NAACP's Man of the Year, as far as I'm concerned. Okay. He's my type of guy. He's a guy that does things. He doesn't talk. He doesn't complain. I mean, we all complain, of course, about what happens in politics, but he actually does stuff. So he's going to be in court again on Monday. Okay. With regard to his case, which is going forward, which for a pro se litigant to go up against, the big bad federal judiciary, it's a pretty big deal for him to be able to get this far. And as you know, this case is about whether or not we may have elections again in Virginia for the House of Delegates at the end of the year. Right, right now, they're deciding whether Paul has standing. And, to be blunt, what the reason that they feel like he doesn't have standing is because he's not black. If he was black, I don't even think they'd be talking about the standing question. But at any rate, Paul's argument, I think, is good, which is that the representation is not right with what we saw with the census. We both know, I think, probably that the state party, DPVA, doesn't want to hear anything about this. I get that the Democrats don't want to, spend money on another election, risk losing more seats in the House of Delegates. There's some arguments made about, whether or not we lose, they'd lose more seats when it comes to Joe Biden's ratings and all that. But I do think that, as Paul said in court the other day, it's unprecedented that you would not have the proper representation a few years after a census, although we know it was delayed by COVID. But it's an interesting situation. So
what do you think is going to come out of that case?
I don't know. I'm surprised he got this far. Everybody's been saying, oh, he's going to lose, blah, blah. He's getting pretty far. He's getting further than people thought. I'm sure that Team Jason Miyares is not exactly thrilled. Like, this one dude, this one lawyer is taking on all their lawyers, and he's getting a lot further than I think they would have ever imagined. I think he's got a shot if he gets some people to sign on, certainly if he gets some black voters to sign on with him in the districts that are most affected or really most pertaining to his argument. You never know what can happen. So I totally understand. I understand the state party's arguments, though. They don't want to have to do it all again as opposed to having the elections next year. The one thing that doesn't make much sense to me, though, it is an opportunity to take back the House of Delegates for the Democrats. So you would think that they would want to, take that shot. But as a question of voting rights, I think we all saw, there was a ton of groups that came out to support Paul's efforts. And they did. I mean, a ton of groups, and including, of course, the Virginia NAACP. So we'll see what happens. I don't know. I really can't predict. I don't know. I listen to him and I listen to other lawyers in Virginia that know what they're talking about, like, Bobby Scott and people like that. But I don't really know.
You mentioned something earlier, and I've been busy all day, so I didn't even know this happened. Now, right. I know Jussie Smollett is a Chicago thing, but right. You said that they let him out? He doesn't have to do 150 days?
Yeah, because it's absolutely ridiculous that he's in jail. He's in jail for 5 months for a misdemeanor. And I think he's a big dum-dum, right? I think he did what they said. He set it up with the 2 muscle-bound dum-dums that he got. But if you think about the crime, it's a nuisance. It's a nuisance crime.
It's a nuisance. You got people that came up and raided on January 6th.
Right.
150 days. They're getting a couple of weeks. Some of them are even a couple of weeks.
Exactly right. That's exactly right. And so why is he in jail for 5 months for some dumbass prank? I have no idea. But he what it is, the bigger story, just to take 1 minute for this, is that we think that certain authorities in Chicago were not happy with Kim Foxx, Black female progressive prosecutor, when she prosecuted a cop, Jason Van Dyke, for the killing of Laquan McDonald. Because if you remember the Laquan McDonald, the Jason Van Dyke, when he got into the pokey, that was 3 months before Jesse Smollett's antics. So what we think happened is people, the cops, the authorities, they were ticked off because it was like, wait a minute, you prosecuted this cop and then you're going to let this actor go. So they bigfooted a Black female prosecutor because they weren't happy with her decisions. That's the backstory, in my view, of what really happened.
The whole Laquan incident, that was they sat on that for like a year, right, before it ever came out,
right, because
that was with the Mayor Lightfoot in Chicago, right? They knew about it.
Yeah, well, Rahm Emanuel knew about it.
Oh, well, it happened with Rahm, and then exactly.
And so, we think that that's connected to Jesse Smollett. You would think that Jesse Smollett would have nothing to do with Laquan McDonald, but here we are. So that's just the crazy thing.
So things went well at the White House, I guess, for some of these HBCUs are getting additional resources to protect against these essentially threats that are, I wouldn't say they're not credible, but if they're making threats like that, then it does impact the schools. They need some resources to deal with it.
Exactly right. So even if they're not credible and they're pranks, it's still annoying. I mean, people have to evacuate. You've got to go through some procedures. It's effectively terroristic. It puts people in a state of fear. And in the day and age of politics, unfortunately, that we live in, which was just very divisive lately, you can't be too cavalier about it. After watching the Capitol get attacked, believe me,
it's all serious.
It puts you in a state of anything is possible. My boyfriend is a U.S. Capitol police officer, so that was not a day that I was having a good time. I mean, it was weird because I was sort of blocks away from him, but I'm texting him and his friends and everything and all the cops I know. And to my shock, they were able to text back, but it was a scary thing to watch. And so the HBCU thing, nothing can be taken for granted after you watch the U.S. Capitol get attacked. It's just unbelievable. So, anyway, they've got more resources. There's some fund that's set up for school shootings, so they're using the money for that. And, Vice President Harris came out and talked, and I got to interview Cedric Richmond for a few seconds, and the Secretary of Education, Cardonia. So it was an interesting day, and it was a beautiful day outside. So it was great.
Well, let's talk a little Virginia stuff too. We're right at 8, but I want to talk to you a little bit about your podcast with the Burke File, and I did manage to listen to, I think it was your interview of Phil Thompson in dealing with the cannabis laws in Virginia.
Right.
That was an interesting podcast. You want to talk a little more about that?
Well, Phil Thompson is a tough guy. Phil Thompson's a Marine. Right? That's the first thing you got to know. He's a Marine. Okay. So, I mean, basically what we see around the country is that these states are empowering these bigger marijuana companies, these huge marijuana firms, and they come in and they say the words medical marijuana, blah, blah, blah. Basically what it leads to is that they get a jump start on retail sales effectively of weed. And what Phil and a lot of others were trying
I always try to get the words right, Aaron. Lauren, interrupt you because cannabis. People say weed, they say marijuana, but it's cannabis. It's the cannabis industry. But go ahead.
Okay. All right. Okay. We'll call it cannabis. Okay. So at any rate, what's going on is that there's a feeling among a lot of the activists that there should have been a boutique industry set up that had a low barrier of entry for the normal average person who wanted to sell, normal average amounts. And of course, if the state wanted to regulate that, of course they could. And of course, that's not happening. So what's happening is what always happens, which is that we saw this in Maryland and we saw this in almost every other state except like Oklahoma and California. You've seen that these bigger industries come in and they basically control the game. All of this, by the way, should have been figured out under the Democrats last year, by the way. I'm not sure why everybody waited to find out whether or not Terry McAuliffe was going to win or lose. I mean, just do what you can.
Do what you're being paid to do.
Right, when you're in power. That's
when you have
power, right? When you know you have the power, right? So
that's been the problem with the Democrats.
Mm-hmm.
When they have the power, they need to go ahead and execute a lot of small business related laws for small businesses and changes to acquisition laws, the cannabis laws. When you have it, you have to use it. The folks on the other side of the aisle, they do it and they don't care. So when Democrats have an opportunity to be more decisive and make things happen to keep their constituency happy, and because it's the right thing to do, they should do it. So tell me more about. Go ahead. I'm going to get off. You talk. We're here to hear.
I mean, it's a great example of how. I mean, Republicans come in, they do it with no shame. They come in, they take power, and they ram through whatever it is that they can ram through with no shame, which to me is
just ram it right through.
Right. That's the way
they come in. They want to talk about it. No. You got the numbers. Get it done.
Right. the most dangerous words in politics is let's do a study. Right. I mean, that's like when you hear the words let's have a study or let's do a study.
Or blue ribbon commission, that simply means somebody has gotten to somebody and they don't want anything to change. And they want to study it for another 10 years as though they don't already know the answer. It's ridiculous.
We've been studying now for 400 years about certain issues. And this one's a pretty clear one. And it amazes me how, let's have a study. The other thing, Phil Thompson had brought up, which is a good point.
Yeah.
There's that equity piece in there that has, this idea that you Black-owned business need to somehow partner with a bigger white business to figure out. Totally ridiculous. Totally ridiculous. This is a forced sale industry, a supply-demand industry. There's no mystery to marijuana.
He called that what it was, sharecropping. They don't need to sharecrop with anybody. They're independent businesses. They can operate on their own. So much of this has been used against the African-American community and small businesses. This is an opportunity to turn that around. And here they are doing this.
Exactly.
That irritates me to no end.
Exactly. It sounded to me like a provision of like, keep your eye on these Black sellers. They might make too much money and we want to know about it when they are making too much money. All they needed to do was have a boutique level licensing of like $2,000-3,000. So most people could sell, and that's all that needed to happen. And somehow that didn't happen. I mean, I do remember last year, Senator Surville and Senator Favola did get up. They talked about equity. They fought, and all the Republicans, jumped out of their seat trying to stop them, because once you start talking about money, it gets real. I mean, to me, the issues that we, as the Black community particularly, needs to focus on are issues around money and business. It was interesting. I actually got to talk to Glenn Youngkin. I think it was January or maybe it was December. I think it was December. Time goes by so fast. Glenn Youngkin taught a class at Virginia State University on business, on small business. And, and I know the Democrats are so partisan. They're like, oh my God, we don't care. We hate him anyway. But if this guy is going to talk small business, you're going to get my attention a little bit. I mean, if you're talking about teaching classes and make money and those types of things, I'm game. I'm game. So it'll be interesting to see how far he goes.
You can't be on both sides of that, though. You can't be talking something positive for small business and African Americans at the same time you're trying to suppress the vote and supporting white nationalism. You can't. Two of those things cannot exist. Well, they can exist in the same human being, but they can't exist from a democratic standpoint, because in the end, you need power through your vote to get things done.
Well, as African Americans, I think we know more than anybody in American
Right.
history that there are these certain moments where you try not to totally throw the baby out with the bathwater. I mean, we know that LBJ used the N-word all the time, and then he passed the best civil rights legislation in American history, the Voting Rights Act. And it's sort of one of those things where you have to decide, how much you're going to say to yourself, I got to throw this person out the door because I disagree on all of these things. But then they do this one thing like fund HBCUs or something. It's kind of we'll see what Glenn Youngkin does moving forward. We can see who he is, like DeSantis light, sort of a more polite version of DeSantis, but not quite as bad, but still the same thing. I get it.
Well,
I get
it this way. Things like this are going to happen because people aren't stupid. They saw what happened when you controlled all the levers to power.
Right.
What you do, what you did, and what you didn't do. So when they come back and you come back again and say, well, hey, I need your support. And you're like, well, wait a minute. We gave you everything before and you did nothing with it. You did a study, damn it. Okay. We don't want no more studies. Okay. We need you to act on our behalf. That's why we put you in there.
I know.
So these are the sort of things when we talk democratic strategy and democratic messaging, how can I give a good message if you haven't executed the strategy? Because they're going to come back and say, well, we gave you everything you needed. You didn't get it done. At least get some of it done.
Yeah, well, at least get some of it done is what leads.
You got to get it all done, but deliver some of
it. Well, that at least get some of it done is why I think we do have a dilemma sometimes when we watch the parties, whether it's the Democrats or Republicans, not want to work with somebody simply because they have a D or R next to their name. I was talking to a state senator, Virginia state senator. I won't name who it is because it kind of wasn't off the record, but I'm not like I don't divulge conversations that I have with everybody. I'll just say that we were talking about the fact that when the Republicans were in charge of the state Senate, they used to argue, they used to kill Democratic bills automatically, even if they were good bills. And the same thing, of course, is happening over in the House of Delegates, right? They just kill the Democratic bills. They don't care how good they are. And that's a real shame because every now and then a bill does come along that's not particularly partisan, that, it used to be something about potholes or something that is not a partisan bill. But it's shame that our politics work that way. And I understand that they do. At the same time, if Glenn Youngkin wants to fund HBCUs to a record amount, I think we should be for that. I think we should not stop him from doing that. I'm not saying
I'm not the guy who stands up in a room when someone says, I'm for everybody getting as much air that they need to breathe. I'm not going to hold up my hand and say, well, since someone who I don't like said that, I'm not going to breathe. Okay. No, I need air. Okay. So that all makes sense. But I think it's more important that we hold our folks accountable.
What do you mean, our folks?
And on that accountable thing, we've got a little bit of time left, Aaron. I got to have you back again because I want to be respectful of people's time. We're about 13 minutes over. But I'm gonna toss something back your way to say, what can we sort of end on right now and come back on when I have you back on again, let's say in a couple of weeks or whatever, when we have more time.
That's a deal. And I'll promise to look at my watch and actually set an alarm next time. So by that time, in 2 or 3 weeks, the Paul Goldman thing will probably will have been decided. We will know who the state party chair is. I think I haven't asked him yet, but I should interview Josh Stanfield and Susan. I know you interviewed Susan. So I should interview just to see, what's in his head. He did send out something interesting the other day that I said to myself, maybe I should talk to him. But I do think in a few weeks we'll have a much more interesting discussion because we'll know who the state party chair is. We'll know what happened with Goldman. We'll know a few things, and the budget might be done too in the House of Delegates, or I should say the General Assembly. So we'll have a few more things to talk about.
And we can maybe talk recitation and sort of a look back on what happened.
Absolutely.
Going forward.
Absolutely. Okay? Definitely a look back on what happened.
So It is what it is. I'd love having you here and hopefully getting you back again as I try to get my technology working here. I don't know what's going on here. Did I lose my thing? Oh, there we go. There we go. So here we go. I got to end this thing because I don't want to go too much over time.
Okay.
We can readjust and redo it. So I just want to tell folks, thank you for coming here. I want to thank all the folks who are tuning in whenever they tune in and telling you welcome to the Virginia Democratic Small Business Caucus Show. Live. We're going to have you back next time. We look forward to it. Okay, Lauren?
Oh, anytime. I'll get it right next time. I'll get it right.
We'll get it right next time.
Anytime. Thanks, Mark.
Don't go anywhere. We're going to go ahead and go offline.
Okay.
Bye.